Everyone thought he was just the janitor, the guy who mopped floors and emptied trash. But one morning, the CEO heard something that froze him in his tracks. This janitor was speaking 9 different languages like a pro. What happened next shocked the entire office and changed one man's life forever. It was a chilly Monday morning in downtown Chicago. The glass doors of Meridian Tech Corporation swung open as employees hurried inside with steaming coffees and tired faces. Among them, quietly pushing his cleaning cart, was Luis, the janitor everyone barely noticed. The faint sound of his cart's wheels rolling across the marble floor mixed with the buzz of conversations, the clicking of heels, and the hum of elevators carrying people to their floors. Luis had worked there for almost 5 years. Every day followed the same rhythm. Arrive before sunrise, mop the hallways before the first employees walked in, make sure the glass walls sparkled, and empty the trash bins that overflowed with yesterday's coffee cups and snack wrappers. He was known for being polite, always greeting people with a smile, but no one really stopped to talk to him. To most, he was part of the background, as invisible as the hum of the air conditioning or the shine on the floor. What people didn't know was that behind those quiet eyes, Luis carried a lifetime of stories. Every corner of that office reminded him of a past he never spoke about. Back home in Brazil, he had once been a respected linguistics professor, fluent in multiple languages, teaching university students about the beauty of communication and culture. But when his wife fell ill, everything changed. After her passing, grief had left him hollow. He moved to the U.S. searching for peace, but with no recognition of his degrees and his limited finances, the only work he could find was as a janitor. Still, Luis never complained. He took pride in what he did. He cleaned as if each polished surface reflected not just light, but his dignity. He always told himself, work is work. What matters is how you do it. And even though the office barely noticed him, he noticed everyone. The young interns nervous on their first day, the overworked managers rushing through lunch, and the CEO who always carried a calm but tired expression. That CEO was Ethan Clark, mid-40s, confident, sharp, and always thinking 5 steps ahead. Ethan had built Meridian Tech from a small startup to a global corporation. He was known for being disciplined and fair, but also distant. He greeted Luis politely once or twice, but like everyone else, never really took the time to talk. Until one ordinary morning changed everything. Ethan had stepped out of his office early to grab a document from the printer room. The hallway was quiet except for the faint hum of machines and the rhythmic swish of Luis's mop. As Ethan walked by, he heard something that made him stop mid-step. Luis was speaking, not English, not Spanish, but fluent German. His tone was confident, his pronunciation perfect. Ethan's eyebrows furrowed. He turned the corner to see Luis standing beside Mr. Keller from accounting, who was visibly relieved. Luis was pointing to an email on the computer screen, calmly explaining something in German, then switching to English to clarify. Ethan's curiosity got the best of him. "Wait, was that German?" he asked, his voice carrying a mix of confusion and intrigue. Luis turned, startled. His face flushed slightly. "Oh, yes, sir. Sorry about that. I was just helping Mr. Keller with an email to the Berlin branch." He wasn't sure how to phrase it properly. Ethan tilted his head, genuinely surprised. "You speak German?" Luis smiled politely. "Yes, sir. Among a few others." The CEO blinked. "A few others? What do you mean by that?" Luis hesitated, unsure if he should say more. "Well, I can also speak Spanish, of course, and French, Italian, Mandarin, Russian, a couple more." He shrugged modestly. Languages have always been something I love. Ethan stared at him, trying to process what he'd just heard. That's incredible, he finally said. I had no idea. Luis chuckled softly. Most people don't ask. Ethan folded his arms, still fascinated. How did you even learn so many? Luis took a breath, his eyes glancing down the hallway, as if looking through time itself. I studied linguistics back home in Brazil. I taught for nearly 15 years. I loved teaching, especially helping students understand how languages connect people across cultures. But after my wife passed away, I needed a change. I moved here, but life didn't quite go as planned. For a moment, neither man spoke. The sound of the mop dripping into the bucket filled the silence. Ethan could see the humility in Luis's eyes, not bitterness, just quiet acceptance. Ethan finally said, You know, Luis, I've been here every day for years, and somehow I never really saw you until now. Luis smiled faintly. That's all right, sir. Most people only see what they're looking for. Ethan found himself unexpectedly moved by that response. This wasn't just a janitor with hidden talent. This was a man with depth, wisdom, and a story worth knowing. As Ethan walked back to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd just witnessed. A man who mopped floors by day, but could converse in 9 languages like a diplomat. He realized how easy it was to overlook brilliance when it didn't come wrapped in a suit or a fancy title. That short conversation would go on to change not just Luis's life, but the entire company's. Because from that moment, Ethan Clark saw his janitor not as an employee, but as an opportunity to redefine what true value looked like. Ethan was intrigued. He followed Luis into the break room, his curiosity now impossible to ignore. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence as Luis wiped his hand with a towel, trying not to look too nervous. Ethan leaned against the counter, studying him, really studying him for the first time. How many languages do you actually speak? He asked, half expecting to hear 2 or 3. Luis hesitated, looking down at the floor before replying softly, 9, sir. English, Spanish, German, French, Italian, Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, and Japanese. Ethan blinked in disbelief. 9, he repeated, his voice rising slightly. You're telling me you can switch between all those fluently? Luis gave a modest nod. Yes, sir. I've been speaking most of them since my 20s. Some better than others, but I can hold full conversations. Ethan's jaw tightened as he tried to process what he'd just heard. That's incredible. Most people struggle to learn even 1 or 2. Luis smiled faintly, a touch of humility in his expression. Languages were my life, sir. I used to be a translator and linguistics professor back in Brazil. I worked with universities, embassies, even a few international corporations. I loved it. Teaching, translating, helping people understand each other. Words were my world. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. A professor? You're telling me you used to teach at university? Luis nodded again. Yes, for almost 15 years. I started teaching when I was 24. My students came from everywhere. Some wanted to become diplomats, others travelers or business interpreters. It made me proud to watch them succeed. He paused, his voice softening. Then my wife got sick. Cancer. I spent 2 years trying to save her, but his voice trailed off, and he looked away toward the window. When she passed, I couldn't stand being in the same city anymore. Every street, every cafe, every classroom reminded me of her. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just stood there quietly, letting Luis take his time. So I left. Luis continued. I came to the U.S. thinking I could start over. But my credentials didn't mean much here. The language barrier, the paperwork, the costs, everything felt impossible. I applied for teaching jobs, translation work, anything close to what I knew. But no one was hiring a middle-aged foreigner with an accent and no local references. He let out a small laugh, the kind that hides pain. So when this janitor job opened up, I took it. I told myself it would be temporary, just until I found something better. But 5 years later, here I am. Ethan exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. 5 years, he murmured. 5 years, and no one ever knew. Louise shrugged. People don't usually ask the janitor about his past. They see the uniform, not the man. That line hit Ethan like a quiet thunderclap. He'd walked through those same hallways 1,000 times and never once thought to ask Louise anything beyond, "How's your day?" And yet, here stood a man whose mind held the languages of nearly half the world. Ethan sat down at one of the break room tables, shaking his head. "You know, Louise, I spend millions every year hiring consultants and communication specialists who can barely manage one foreign client call. And all this time, you've been here, probably capable of handling half our global account yourself." Louise smiled politely. "I appreciate that, sir, but my time for that kind of work is past. I'm just grateful to have a stable job and good people around me." Ethan looked at him with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You really don't see how special you are, do you?" Louise chuckled softly. "I'm not special, Mr. Clark. I just had opportunities others didn't, and then lost them. Life changes people. It humbles you." There is something about the way he said it, quiet, honest, with the kind of wisdom that can't be faked. Ethan felt a rare sense of respect forming inside him. He realized that Louise wasn't speaking like a man defeated by life, but like someone who had made peace with it. Ethan finally said, "You know, Louise, in my business, we talk a lot about innovation, technology, and progress. But I think the real genius is people like you. People who adapt, who rebuild themselves from nothing." Louise tilted his head, a bit surprised by the compliment. "That's kind of you to say, sir. But sometimes you don't rebuild because you want to. You rebuild because there's no other choice." Ethan nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Still, not everyone manages it with grace. For a moment, both men were silent, the soft whir of the vending machine the only sound between them. Then Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at an idea forming. "Louise, tell me something. If you had the chance to use your skills again, to do something more meaningful, would you take it?" Louise hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I suppose I would, yes. But I'm not sure anyone's looking for a janitor who speaks 9 languages." Ethan's smile widened. "Maybe they are. They just don't know it yet." As Ethan stood and left the break room, his mind was racing with possibilities. He had no idea what the next few days would bring, but one thing was certain. He was never going to look at Louise the same way again. Ethan, known throughout the corporate world for his sharp instincts and daring decisions, suddenly had an idea that made even him a little nervous. The kind of idea that could either go brilliantly right or terribly wrong. He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Louise," he said, "we've got an important international meeting tomorrow. Delegates from Japan, France, and Germany are flying in for a partnership deal worth millions. Our translators just backed out at the last minute. Would you be willing to help us?" Louise blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Me? But I'm just the janitor." Ethan smiled, cutting him off. "Not tomorrow," he said with a grin. "Tomorrow, you're part of the team." Louise hesitated, glancing down at his calloused hands. "Sir, I haven't spoken in a formal setting in years. What if I mess up? Ethan shook his head. Luis, you speak 9 languages fluently. The only thing you can mess up is not believing in yourself. We'll handle the rest. That night, Luis barely slept. He ironed his best shirt, one he hadn't worn in years, and polished his shoes until they shone faintly under the dim light of his apartment. Standing before the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Gone was the quiet janitor with a mop and bucket. Staring back at him was the man he used to be, confident, intelligent, full of purpose. He whispered softly to his reflection, first in English, then French, then Japanese, testing his fluency. The words flowed naturally. It was like rediscovering a part of his soul that had been asleep for years. The next morning, the boardroom at Meridian Tech buzzed with energy. The long glass table gleamed, pitchers of water perfectly aligned beside sleek nameplates. Ethan stood near the head of the table, his expression calm but focused. Around him, the executives whispered nervously. This meeting could make or break their expansion plans. When the international guests arrived, polished, punctual, and precise, Ethan stepped forward with a confident smile. Gentlemen and ladies, he began, allow me to introduce our in-house multilingual expert, Mr. Luis Alvarez. The room went still. Some of the foreign delegates exchanged puzzled looks. A few of the American executives frowned in confusion. Wasn't this the janitor? Luis entered quietly, his posture straight but humble. He bowed slightly to the Japanese delegation, greeted the French team with a warm bonjour, Amias Amos, and nodded respectfully toward the Germans. For a moment, there was silence. Then polite smiles began to appear. As the meeting began, Luis took his place beside Ethan. The first presentation was in Japanese. Luis listened carefully, then translated into English with clarity and precision, capturing not only the words but the subtle tone of respect in Japanese business culture. When the French partners took their turn, Luis shifted seamlessly, speaking their language as if he'd lived in Paris all his life. His voice carried the rhythm and warmth of a native speaker. By the time the German team spoke, the room was completely captivated. Luis's translation wasn't mechanical. It was alive. He adjusted phrasing for cultural nuance, adding gestures, expressions, and tones that made every party feel understood. Ethan watched in amazement. It wasn't just the translation skills that impressed him. It was the way Luis made everyone feel connected. The delegates leaned forward when he spoke. They smiled, nodded, and even laughed during tense moments. Barriers dissolved. It felt less like a corporate negotiation and more like a conversation among trusted friends. At one point, a French executive turned to Ethan and said quietly, "Your translator is remarkable. We've never had such smooth communication before." Ethan smiled. "He's one of the best," he replied proudly. After 3 hours, the meeting concluded with handshakes and smiles all around. The Japanese lead delegate stood, bowed deeply, and said through Luis, "Your company has earned our respect. We look forward to a long partnership." The room erupted in applause. The deal was sealed. Millions of dollars and months of effort had paid off. Not because of fancy presentations or corporate strategy, but because one man spoke from the heart in 9 different languages. As the guests left, Ethan turned to Luis. "You have no idea what you just did," he said, his voice filled with awe. "That deal was slipping through our fingers. You brought it back." Luis looked stunned. "I was just translating, sir." Ethan shook his head. "No, Luis. You weren't just translating words. You were building bridges. You made them feel understood." When the rest of the staff learned what had happened, the office buzzed with disbelief. Some employees who had barely noticed Luis for years now looked at him with admiration. The janitor, who had once blended into the background, had just helped close the biggest deal in company history. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, Ethan stood by his office window, thinking about everything that had happened. He realized something profound. Talent doesn't always wear a suit or carry a title. Sometimes, it wears a janitor's uniform and carries a mop. And from that day on, Ethan promised himself one thing. Never again would he judge a person by their position, because he had seen firsthand how greatness often hides in the most ordinary places. The next morning, when Luis returned to work, something was different. Every good morning sounded a little warmer, every smile a little more genuine. People didn't just see him, they noticed him. And for the first time in years, Luis felt truly seen. The next day, the office buzzed like never before. Whispers traveled faster than emails. People huddled around coffee machines, peered over cubicles, and scrolled through the internal chat rooms where one topic dominated every conversation. Luis, the janitor. Did you hear? Luis, the janitor, saved the international deal. No way, that's insane. He speaks 9 languages. Man, I can barely handle English before coffee. Dude, he should be running this place. For the first time, everyone saw Luis for who he truly was. Not just the quiet man who polished their desks and emptied their trash, but a man of deep intelligence, humility, and rare brilliance. His story had already become a legend within hours. Some even said the clients had specifically requested that Luis be present in all future meetings. As Luis entered the building that morning, heads turned. People greeted him warmly, clapping on the shoulder, smiling, congratulating. Some of the same employees who used to rush past him without a word now stopped to shake his hand. The receptionist, who'd barely noticed him before, gave him a proud grin. He felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. He hadn't done it for attention or promotion. He'd simply helped because it felt right. But now, walking through those glass halls, it felt like he was seeing the company from an entirely new lens. Then came the email, a sudden, unexpected message that popped up on every employee's screen. All staff meeting, 10 a.m. sharp. Conference hall, mandatory attendance. At 10 a.m., the large conference hall was packed. Employees filled every seat, cameras and phones discreetly recording. There was a buzz of excitement in the air, like something big was about to happen. Ethan Clark, the CEO, stepped onto the stage in his usual confident stride. But today, there was something different in his demeanor, a warmth, a spark that hadn't been there before. And beside him stood Luis, in a freshly pressed shirt and polished shoes, looking nervous but composed. Ethan raised his hand for silence. The room quickly quieted. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "I called this meeting because something extraordinary happened yesterday, and I think it's something that deserves all of our attention." He paused, glancing toward Luis with a smile. "Sometimes," Ethan said, "the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight." Yesterday, a man many of us walk by every day without a second thought reminded us what true talent and humility look like. He turned toward the audience, his voice steady but full of emotion. "This man helped us close one of the most important international deals in this company's history. Not because it was his job, not because he was asked to do it, but because he cared enough to step up when no one else could." Ethan gestured toward Luis, who stood awkwardly, unsure where to look. The crowd's eyes were fixed on him. He didn't ask for recognition, Ethan continued. He didn't even want credit. But he taught us all a powerful lesson. That greatness doesn't always sit behind an executive desk or wear an expensive suit. Sometimes, it wears a janitor's uniform and carries a mop. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Ethan smiled and said the word that would change Luis's life forever. From today onward, Luis Alvarez is no longer our janitor. He is now officially our head of global communications. For a second, there was silence, and then the room erupted. Applause thundered through the hall. Some stood on their feet, cheering. Others whistled and shouted Luis's name. The employees from every department, accounting, marketing, design, all clapped until their hands hurt. Luis stood frozen, eyes wide, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Sir, I don't know what to say," he stammered. Ethan smiled. "Say yes. Say you'll help us take this company to the next level, just like you did yesterday." Luis's voice broke slightly as he replied, "Yes, sir. I'll do my best. Thank you." Tears welled in his eyes as the applause continued. It wasn't just a moment of personal triumph. It was a moment of validation, proof that hard work, humility, and kindness could still be recognized in a world obsessed with titles. After the meeting, people lined up to shake his hand. The marketing director said, "We could use your insight on cross-cultural branding." The HR manager added, "We'll need you in tomorrow's orientation. The new hires should hear your story." Luis laughed nervously, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "I'm still the same person," he said softly. That evening, as he left the building, the same sun that had once reflected off his mop bucket now gleamed off the glass office doors as he walked out with his first official briefcase. The security guard gave him a thumbs up. "Congrats, Mr. Alvarez," he said. "You earned it." Luis smiled, his throat tightening with emotion. He looked back at the building one last time before heading home. The same halls he had once cleaned now held his new office. The same people who had once overlooked him now respected him. And in that moment, he realized something powerful. Life doesn't always change overnight because of luck or miracles. Sometimes it changes because someone finally sees your worth. That day, Luis didn't just earn a promotion. He earned back his place in the world. Weeks passed, and Luis's story spread far beyond the walls of Meridian Tech. What started as an internal rumor quickly became a viral headline across the country. News outlets, blogs, and talk shows couldn't get enough of it. Janitor becomes executive after CEO discovers hidden talent. The headline flashed across TV screens and social media feeds. Local journalists came knocking for interviews. They wanted to meet the man whose humility and brilliance had turned a corporate story into a life lesson. Luis, though shy at first, always gave credit where it was due. "I just did what anyone would have done," he told one reporter. "Mr. Clark was the one who saw something in me when no one else did." Soon, the story made it to national morning shows. Ethan and Luis appeared together on a segment where they shared the story of their unlikely friendship. The interviewer asked Ethan, "What made you trust a janitor with such a high-stakes meeting?" Ethan smiled and replied, "Sometimes instinct tells you to take a chance on people." Luis reminded me that talent doesn't always walk in wearing a suit. Sometimes it pushes him up. The audience applauded. Luis blushed but smiled. His soft-spoken nature, combined with his calm intelligence, won hearts everywhere. He wasn't just a viral headline anymore. He became a symbol of humility, perseverance, and hidden potential. Back at the office, things changed too. Ethan noticed a new kind of energy in the building. People were more respectful to the janitorial staff, more curious about each other's lives. The invisible boundaries between departments began to fade. Employees who had once barely made eye contact with the maintenance crew now stopped to chat, asked how their day was going, even share lunch. Luis, now dressed in a crisp suit and tie, had his own office, though it was simple, without unnecessary luxuries. A plant in the corner, a framed photo of his late wife on the desk, and a single quote hanging on the wall. Greatness starts when you stop looking down on others. Despite his new title as head of global communications, Luis never let his promotion change who he was. He often made time to visit the janitorial team. He'd stop by the storage room, roll up his sleeves, and help them restock supplies or mop a hallway if someone was running behind schedule. "Luis, sir, you don't need to do that anymore," one of the new janitors once told him, embarrassed. Luis smiled. "Titles change, but characters shouldn't. Never forget where you came from." Those words stuck with everyone who heard them. Over time, people began quoting him during meetings and casual conversations. What would Luis do became an inside joke, but one that carried deep respect. Meanwhile, Ethan's leadership began to transform as well. He was invited to speak at conferences across the U.S., and every time he told the story, he ended it the same way. People often think success is about titles, degrees, or the corner office. But real success is about recognizing value in people, even when it's hidden under a janitor's uniform. The audiences always gave him standing ovations. CEOs, managers, and entrepreneurs took notes, inspired to look at their employees differently. Luis's story was no longer just about one man. It had become a corporate lesson on humanity. One quiet afternoon, Ethan stopped by Luis's new office. Luis was typing up a multilingual proposal for an upcoming project with partners from Japan and France. The office smelled faintly of coffee, and soft jazz played in the background. "Luis," Ethan said with a smile, "I've learned more from you in 1 week than in 10 years of running this company." Luis looked up, slightly surprised. "From me, sir? I doubt that. I mean it," Ethan said, taking a seat. "You reminded me that leadership isn't about hierarchy, it's about empathy. You made me see my own company through new eyes." Luis chuckled softly. "And I've learned something too, that sometimes all a person needs is someone to believe in them." For a moment, the two men sat in comfortable silence. They had both changed, not just in position, but in perspective. Then Ethan stood and extended his hand. Luis rose and shook it firmly. But this handshake was different. It wasn't between a CEO and his employee. It was between two equals, two human beings who had changed each other's lives. As Ethan left the office, Luis glanced at his reflection in a glass door. He didn't see the janitor anymore, nor the executive. He saw a man who had lost everything and rebuilt himself through faith, humility, and kindness. Later that evening, as Luis walked through the halls, he passed by the familiar cleaning cart parked near the lobby. The faint smell of lemon polish brought back memories of all those long nights he'd spent working in silence. He smiled, gently placing a hand on the cart handle. "You've served me well," he whispered with a touch of nostalgia. From that day on, everyone at Meridian Tech looked at that cart differently. It wasn't just cleaning equipment anymore. It was a reminder, a symbol of untapped potential, quiet dignity, and second chances. And whenever a new employee joined the company, they were told the story of a janitor who spoke 9 languages and changed the heart of CEO. Because who knows, the next genius, the next hero, the next success story might just be the person you walk past every single day. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.